Just one more thing about what's happening at the border. Donald Trump, of course, I don't know if he's going to declare a national emergency to pretend to build a fake wall. But in reality, what they have been able to do is to make life even more miserable for people whose lives are so miserable that in some instances they will walk thousands of miles to get away from that misery. As you know, you cannot apply for asylum to the United States from whatever country you are coming from until you are on United States territory. You need to have 1 foot in the United States to seek asylum. And what happens is you come across the border, you say, we are seeking asylum, or I am seeking asylum. Maybe you're doing it with your kids. You get a screening. If you can prove credible fear that if you go back to your home country, you will be oppressed in some fashion, you qualify for an actual immigration court hearing. In those instances, under the Obama administration, and now I think under the Trump to a certain extent, you are released under supervision, right? You have to check in with sponsors who are living in the United States. If you can't demonstrate credible fear, you're deported. The Supreme Court established a measure in which to determine whether you can make at least an initial claim that you have a credible fear of being persecuted. And that is that you have a 1 in 10 chance probability of being persecuted. That's enough. And there's some mechanism in which they determine you have a 1 in 10 chance. Maybe a function of how many people, 16-year-olds are killed, or how many go into jail. But the threshold is relatively low for that first process, because you don't want to send someone back home to die, or to be imprisoned for an extended period of time, or to be raped, or to be held, to be kidnapped, or etc., to be beaten on a daily basis. So that has been the standard for over 30 years as to that first part of the process. Now, the Trump administration has essentially created a new interview that must take place in Mexico if you're coming in from the southern border. It employs a much higher standard that would require an asylum seeker to prove that it is more likely than not that they would be persecuted in Mexico in order to remain in the country while their case is pending. So they must have a higher standard. And now, I don't know what's going to happen in Mexico when all these asylum seekers are forced to be there. They have their family is in the United States. That's why they're trying to come to the United States. It remains to be seen. But the Mexican government has said repeatedly that it disagrees with the policy, and they argue it's being imposed on the country by the United States. This is it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. And Mexico has said it would only admit Central Americans between the ages of 18 and 60 as part of the new policy because a large portion of asylum seekers are family units or unaccompanied minors. The Mexican response could erode the potential impact of the new policy in that they will not allow, children to come in. But you're going to see a lot more split up of families in that instance, it seems to me. It's a mess. And it's incredibly harsh and totally unnecessary. But this is what this administration is about. If they have one agenda, even if it doesn't get, there's not a lot of people out there going like, I really want the There's no voters. I don't know that there's a lot of voters out there who have the level of sophistication in their hatred for immigrants that I want a policy where asylum seekers are sent back for preliminary interviews in Mexico. I just don't think that's out there. But I think there's a concerted effort within the administration. And this new book, the author claims that Stephen Miller has said, like, I don't want one asylum seeker to touch this country.
Wow. I don't think there are many voters, but there are certainly segments of capital that are happy to benefit from having immigrants be as marginalized and criminalized as possible.
Well, they're not here. I mean, so it's not just a question of capital may have that interest, but this policy doesn't further that. Yeah, this policy excludes people from out of the country.
But it definitely contributes to the marginalization of immigrants who are here.
It might. When they're all gone, they won't. I mean, this administration, this is where the Trump administration is at loggerheads with some of that. That's why the Koch brothers have an issue with it. So I think in general you're right, but I don't think that's what's animating this. I think what's animating this is white supremacy, white nationalism.
But these people are willing to put up with it because it also benefits them.
I mean, you can argue. I haven't seen evidence of that. There are people, I think, agitating to get against the Trump administration about, on the right. The Chamber of Commerce is not happy with this. Maybe they're pretending about it. But I agree with you. They want a significant number of undocumented people in this country so they can exploit them. But this is not the way you would go about doing it. You would let these people in, and then you can exploit them. They're not supposed to be working. You have them already. You can't exploit them if they're not here. And so this is just, I think, unadulterated white supremacy. And it's grotesque, but it's what this administration has been pushing for, months.